Marvel may know how to enthrall their audiences when it comes to what they put in their panels and up on the big screen, but they haven't always had a perfect track record over the years. Just like any other publisher, they've had a few misses in their time, some of which have gotten a lot of heat and a lot of hate from fans. So today we are diving into their history with our list of the top 10 worst Marvel events. We've talked a lot about these events in the past, so some of them might be familiar if you've been a longtime viewer of our channel. And also, bless your heart for sticking around, mad respect. So with that in mind, let's get to it. In at number 10, Secret Empire. Let's start off our list by looking at the most recent Marvel event on our list, Secret Empire. Secret Empire was a 2017 limited series that followed the series Captain America Steve Rogers, in which it was revealed that Rogers had been replaced by a version of himself that was loyal to Hydra, and had been working as a sleeper agent to quietly establish Hydra as the main world power. Really, it just got a bunch of people worked up over the fact that Cap was a Nazi, and more people worked up about the fact that he actually wasn't a Hydra member, and that it was just an alternate version of Cap. Oh, and the heated debates that came out of it too. On top of that, the creators of Marvel claimed that having a Nazi Cap wasn't any sort of response to the rise of fascism that we've been seeing in recent years in real life. Truth is, historically, comics have always been colored by the socio-political factors of their time. It's how comics started off in the first place in the 1890s with cartoon strips like The Yellow Kid. They're inherently political if you take a closer look. Not saying that it was Marvel's main goal here, but it's not something to ignore, that's for sure. In at number 9, Infinity Crusade. The Infinity Crusade, a product of the 90s, specifically 1993, was the follow-up to the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity War, and it wasn't nearly as good. A 6-issue limited series written by Jim Starlin, it followed Adam Warlock who, in possession of the Infinity Gauntlet, expels the good and evil aspects of his being to become a complete and total logical being, who therefore can use the gauntlet and not be corrupted by it. But in doing this, Warlock's old foe Magus, the evil version of himself from a future timeline, ended up being released from his body, along with the incarnation of Warlock's goodness, called the Goddess. And the whole series is Marvel's heroes fighting against the Goddess who has her own agenda. Compared to the Infinity Gauntlet and even Infinity War, Crusade pales in comparison, especially in terms of creating strong enough conflict for readers to be invested in it. Up next, number 8, Blood and Thunder. Blood and Thunder is a Thor event, and it can be best summed up as this. Thor goes crazy from something called the Warrior's Madness, and a whole bunch of powerful heroes need to stop him from destroying Asgard. Some of the art in it is very questionable, and Thor is basically an asshole to everyone he loves. He straight up beats Sif, who is his wife at the time. He beats up Beta Ray Bill by smashing him so hard into a planet that the planet breaks, and on top of that, the ties into this crossover have very little to do with the actual main story event. All in all, it felt like a sloppy way to have Thor fight the Silver Surfer and Adam Warlock. Up next at 7, the Clone Saga. Another one from the 90s coming your way at this number, let's discuss Spider-Man and the Clone Saga. Spider-Man has had a few questionable arcs in his time, but the Clone Saga, which ran from 1994 to 1996, is often one of the first controversial arcs that comes to mind. Now initially it was a story that was meant to wrap up within a year's time, but because of sales and how well received that first year was, Marvel had its writers stretch it out and continue it, which proved to not go over too well with fans, since the quality of the stories significantly declined. There were changes that people just didn't like. It's also worth noting that there was a Clone Saga in 1973 penned by Jerry Conway, and that's not to be mistaken with this 90s saga, although it does involve a character who was introduced in the 70s saga, Ben Reilly. Reilly was Spider-Man's clone in the 70s storyline, and in this arc he returns as Scarlet Spider. Peter would eventually be replaced by Ben, which did not go over well with fans. The original Green Goblin was resurrected too, and there was a bunch of questions raised by that fans had confusion over based on the continuity. The storyline complicated things a lot more for Spider-Man's character versus simplifying it and bringing it back to basics, which was what the creative team had initially intended to do with the arc. Moving on to number 6, Avengers issue 200. Avengers issue 200 was supposed to be a very special issue. Anytime a series hits a number like that, it is an accolade to be celebrated. But Avengers issue 200 had been clouded by controversy. It was the story in which Carol Danvers, Ms. Marvel at the time, was abducted and raped and impregnated by Marcus Immortus. All for her to give birth to a son who was just Marcus Immortus reincarnated so he could have a body on Earth and escape an alternate dimension. Yeah, it's some f***ed up stuff, my dudes. And what did the Avengers do? Nothing. Literally nothing. Carol clearly needed help, but all they thought was that she was in love with Marcus, who states that he brainwashed her. Like, blatantly. It's really messed up and something that writers like Chris Claremont actively sought to fix when they were writing Carol's character moving forward, specifically with Chris in Uncanny X-Men and other titles. Moving on to number 5, Secret Wars 2. The first Secret Wars story event is often considered to be one of Marvel's best. Its successor, Secret Wars 2, is often considered to be one of their worst. It's incredibly convoluted. Released between 1985 and 1986, it was a direct follow-up to Secret Wars, which, by the way, began as a marketing scheme to sell action figures, but was just so well written that people didn't care. Marvel made a lot of money off of it. Just take my money. But because of how successful it was, a sequel was immediately thrown into production. And it was not good. It brought back the Beyonder, who decides to visit Earth in a search for enlightenment, and conflict ensues. And the worst part is, the Beyonder's motives seem really unclear, making it for a major letdown compared to its predecessor. Moving on to number 4, Axis. Axis, which came out in 2014, was a tie-in that followed Red Skull's attempts to harness the ability of the world's most powerful telepath, Charles Xavier. He would manipulate him into becoming Onslaught, a dude who we will be discussing later on our list, and sought to enslave thoughts, create an army, and broadcast messages of hate all across the globe. Just a typical day in the office for Red Skull, right? In addition to that, every character's moral alignment is flipped, meaning that the good guys became bad guys and villains became heroes. The goal with Axis was to flip the Marvel Universe upside down, to shake things up. Characters lost their distinct voices though. It became really muddled. And the ending was just a bit of a bummer, and it got a lot of heat for ruining many beloved characters. Speaking of which, in at number 3, The Crossing. The Crossing was a 90s story arc that threatened to completely ruin Iron Man Tony Stark. In it, we learn that Tony has actually been working for Kang the Conqueror secretly for years now. Wait, why does this sound familiar? Did Secret Empire just kind of rip off one of Marvel's most terrible story arcs? Well, you guys be the judge of that. Anywho, a bunch of people get murdered, a mysterious time portal appears in the Avengers mansion, and a young Tony Stark is brought to the future to fight present evil Tony Stark, and ends up taking over the mantle afterwards when evil Tony Stark is dead and dealt with. Overall, it's a giant mess, and it doesn't do one of Marvel's flagship characters any justice. Up next at 2, Onslaught. So we haven't talked a whole lot about the X-Men on this list yet, but don't you worry, X-Men fans, because we've got one of the worst for you at this number. X-Men Onslaught, an arc that ran between 1994 and 1995, was triggered by an event that went down in a battle between the X-Men and Magneto's acolytes. Magneto had ripped the adamantium from Wolverine's body, causing Charles Xavier to retaliate by shutting down Magneto's mind and rendering him catatonic. Because of this, the darkest aspects of Xavier's consciousness and Magneto's mind merged into Onslaught, a be-all end-all villain whose might required not only the X-Men to fight him off, but also the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. But fear not, Marvel had a terrible idea on how to resurrect them, which brings us to our next and final number. In at 1, Heroes Reborn. There is a lot to say about Heroes Reborn. Heroes Reborn was a story arc that occurred in the aftermath of our last number, Onslaught. After the Avengers and the Fantastic Four had been killed off, Marvel brought in Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld to be the creative team on this arc that occurred between 1996 and 1997. It was a tough time for Marvel financially, and they were outsourcing the production of some of their major titles. That was the first mistake. The concept is what the name suggests. These heroes were all reborn thanks to a pocket universe created by Franklin Richards. They were oblivious to what had happened to them, and many of their histories and origins were revised in ways that fans did not like. It's one thing to do that in an alternate timeline like the Ultimate Universe, but to completely crap on years of history, well, that's not really going to have the best perceptions from your readers. Oh, but perhaps worst of all was the artwork. The artwork is absolute garbage. Captain America has a fridge for a chest. And don't get me started on the hands and feet. Ugh. Alright, there we have it, friends. What other Marvel events don't rank high on your list of good? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know your thoughts and feels. If you guys dug this video, share that love, hit that thumbs up button, share this video with a friend. And hey, if you haven't already, subscribe to Top 10 Nerd. We'd love it if you stuck around some more. In the meantime, thanks for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video. Pew pew. Right, there we have it, friends. What other story arcs can you think of that were absolute garbage? What was my title again for this one? Did I write an outro for this one? Oh, that's my outro. There we have it, friends. Just take my money. Just take my money. Just take my money. Enlightenment. Take my money. Enlightenment. Take my money. Thor goes crazy. Take my money. Thor goes crazy. Enlightenment. Thor goes crazy. Thor goes crazy. Thor goes crazy. Enlightenment. The artwork is absolute garbage. Captain America has a